The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as Sarah Mitchell stepped out of the transport vehicle. Dust swirled around her boots as she surveyed the sprawling facility that would become her proving ground. At 26, she carried herself with quiet confidence, though her petite frame and gentle demeanor often led others to underestimate her capabilities. Colonel James Harrison watched from his office window as the new recruits assembled for orientation. His weathered face showed the marks of 30 years in military service, and his reputation for being tough but fair preceded him wherever he went. When his aide handed him the roster of incoming trainees, his eyebrows raised slightly at one particular name. Sarah Mitchell, he read aloud, tapping the paper with his finger. Says here, she's requesting placement in the Advanced Marksmanship Program. His aide, Lieutenant Rodriguez, glanced at the file. Yes, sir. She comes highly recommended from basic training, though some of her instructors noted she seemed unconventional in her approach. The colonel chuckled, a sound that rumbled from deep in his chest. Unconventional, you say? Well, we'll see about that. Schedule her for evaluation this afternoon. Sarah had grown up on a ranch in Montana, where shooting wasn't just a skill, but a necessity. Her father had taught her to handle firearms before she could properly ride a bicycle. By age 12, she could hit a prairie dog at 300 yards with her father's old hunting rifle. Her brothers, both older and stronger, had initially teased her about her interest in shooting, but their laughter died when she consistently outperformed them at local competitions. The decision to join the military hadn't been easy. Sarah had been pursuing a degree in veterinary medicine when her younger cousin was killed in action overseas. The loss shattered her family and left her questioning her path in life. She found herself drawn to serve, to honor his memory, and perhaps find meaning in the tragedy that had struck so close to home. During basic training, Sarah had kept a low profile. She completed every task with quiet efficiency, never boasting about her abilities or seeking attention. When it came to standard marksmanship training, she performed well enough to meet requirements, but never showed her full potential. Something inside her whispered to wait, to prove herself when it truly mattered. The Advanced Marksmanship Program was legendary within the military. Only the top 1% of shooters even qualified for consideration, and the washout rate was notorious. The program was designed to identify and train the elite snipers who would serve in the most dangerous and critical missions. It was a world dominated by men who had proven themselves in combat, and Sarah knew she would face skepticism at every turn. As afternoon approached, Sarah made her way to the shooting range where her evaluation would take place. The facility was impressive, with lanes extending far into the distance and targets at various ranges. She noticed several other soldiers observing from nearby, their expressions mixing curiosity with barely concealed amusement. Colonel Harrison arrived precisely on time, his boots clicking against the concrete as he approached. He carried himself with the bearing of a man who had seen combat and emerged stronger for it. His eyes, sharp and assessing, studied Sarah with the intensity of someone accustomed to making quick judgments about people's capabilities. Mitchell, he said, his voice carrying the authority that came naturally after decades of command. I understand you think you're ready for our program. Sarah stood at attention, her spine straight, and her gaze focused ahead. Yes, sir. I believe I have the skills necessary to contribute to the program's objectives. The colonel walked slowly around her, his inspection thorough but not unkind. Tell me about your experience with firearms, soldier. I've been shooting since I was 8 years old, sir. Primarily hunting and competitive shooting in civilian life. During basic training, I qualified expert marksman on all standard weapons. Hunting rabbits and deer isn't quite the same as what we do here, the colonel said, though his tone wasn't dismissive. Our shooters need to perform under pressure at extreme ranges in conditions that would challenge seasoned veterans. Sarah nodded. I understand the difference, sir. I'm prepared to prove my capabilities. The colonel studied her for a long moment, then gestured toward the range. Very well. Let's start with something simple. 500 yards, standard military rifle. Show me what you've got. The observers gathered closer as Sarah approached the shooting position. She could hear whispered comments and suppressed chuckles from some of the watching soldiers. The colonel's own expression remained neutral, but she caught what might have been the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Sarah examined the rifle she'd been given, checking its balance and sighting system with practiced movements. She'd fired this model before during basic training, though not at this particular range. The weapon felt familiar in her hands, and she quickly made minor adjustments to the scope. The wind was light, but variable, shifting slightly every few seconds. Sarah spent several minutes observing the grass and flags downrange, reading the subtle signs that would affect her shot. She noticed how the wind patterns changed at different distances, creating a complex puzzle that needed solving before she could engage the target. "Take your time," the colonel said, though she detected a note of impatience in his voice. "We have other evaluations to conduct today." Sarah settled into position, her breathing becoming slow and controlled. She pressed her cheek against the stock and found her natural point of aim. Through the scope, the target seemed to dance slightly in the heat waves rising from the ground. She made minute adjustments to her position, finding that perfect balance where the rifle felt like an extension of her own body. The first shot surprised everyone except Sarah. The bullet struck the target dead center, creating a clean hole in the bullseye. A murmur went up from the observers, but the colonel simply nodded and made a note on his clipboard. "Again," he said. The second shot was equally precise, followed by 3 more that created a tight group at the center of the target. Sarah cleared the rifle and stepped back, her expression calm and professional. She had performed exactly as she knew she could, but she also understood this was just the beginning. Colonel Harrison examined the target through binoculars, his expression unreadable. When he lowered them, he looked at Sarah with what might have been newfound interest. "Not bad, Mitchell. Not bad at all." He paused, considering his next words. "But 500 yards is what we expect from any competent soldier. Let's see how you handle a real challenge." He gestured to his aide, who began setting up equipment for a much longer shot. Sarah watched as targets were placed at increasingly distant ranges, each one smaller and more challenging than the last. She felt a familiar excitement building inside her, the same feeling she'd experienced as a child when her father would set up increasingly difficult shots to test her abilities. 800 yards, the colonel announced. Winds picking up, and the lights started to change. "This is where we separate the real shooters from the lucky ones." The observers had grown quiet now, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Sarah could feel their attention focused on her as she approached the shooting position. The weight of their expectations and skepticism pressed down on her, but she had learned long ago to use pressure as fuel rather than burden. As she settled into position for the longer shot, Sarah's mind drifted briefly to her father's words from years ago. Shooting isn't about the gun or even the target. It's about understanding yourself, the environment, and the connection between intention and execution. She had never fully grasped what he meant until this moment, when everything seemed to crystallize into perfect clarity. The shot rang out across the range, and through her scope, Sarah watched the bullet find its mark with surgical precision. The silence that followed was broken only by the colonel's quiet exclamation of surprise. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Looks like we might have something special here after all." But Sarah knew this was still just the beginning. The real tests were yet to come, and she could see in the colonel's eyes that he was already planning something that would push her abilities to their absolute limit. She welcomed the challenge, knowing that everything in her life had led to this moment when she would finally have the chance to show the world what she was truly capable of achieving. Word of Sarah's performance spread quickly through the base. By evening, officers who had never heard her name were discussing the young woman who had made the colonel take notice. Some expressed genuine curiosity about her abilities, while others remained skeptical, suggesting that a few lucky shots didn't make someone ready for the elite program. Sarah spent that evening in the barracks, carefully cleaning and maintaining her equipment. Her bunkmates peppered her with questions about the day's events, but she remained characteristically modest about her performance. She had learned early in life that action spoke louder than words, and she preferred to let her shooting do the talking. The next morning brought an unexpected summons to the colonel's office. Sarah arrived to find him studying a series of topographical maps spread across his desk. The office walls were decorated with photographs from his various deployments, medals from distinguished service, and a collection of rifles that spoke to his own expertise in marksmanship. "Mitchell," he said without looking up from the maps, "I've been thinking about yesterday's performance. 800 yards is impressive, but it's not extraordinary. In real combat situations, our snipers often need to engage targets at much greater distances." Sarah remained at attention, waiting for him to continue. She could sense this conversation was leading somewhere significant. "I've decided to arrange a special demonstration," the colonel continued, finally, looking up to meet her eyes. "Something that will either prove you belong in this program or send you back to regular infantry. Are you interested in a real challenge?" "Yes, sir. I'm ready for whatever test you have in mind." The colonel stood and walked to a large map mounted on his wall. It showed the training facility and surrounding terrain in detail, with various ranges and obstacles marked. He pointed to a location far from the standard shooting ranges. 2 miles from here, there's a ridge that overlooks a valley. We use it for advanced training scenarios because of the extreme distances involved. Tomorrow morning, you'll have the opportunity to attempt a shot that would challenge even our most experienced snipers." Sarah's heart rate increased slightly, though she kept her expression neutral. "What distance are we talking about, sir?" 2,400 meters, the colonel said, watching carefully for her reaction. "Nearly a mile and a half. At that range, you're dealing with bullet drop, wind drift, air density, temperature variations, and the Coriolis effect. It's the kind of shot that separates the exceptional from the merely good." The magnitude of the challenge hit Sarah immediately. She had never attempted anything close to that distance, even in her most ambitious practice sessions back home. The physics involved were staggering, and the margin for error essentially non-existent. "I understand this is a significant challenge, sir. I'd like to attempt it." Colonel Harrison studied her for a long moment. "You'll have access to our best equipment, including a precision rifle system specifically designed for extreme long-range engagement. You'll also have the assistance of our chief instructor for ballistics calculations. But ultimately, success or failure will depend entirely on your skill." That evening, Sarah found herself in the base library, poring over technical manuals about long-range shooting. The mathematics involved were complex, involving calculations for bullet trajectory, atmospheric conditions, and a dozen other variables that could affect a shot at extreme distance. She filled several pages with notes and diagrams, trying to absorb as much theoretical knowledge as possible before the practical test. Master Sergeant Williams, the chief marksmanship instructor, found her there well past midnight. He was a grizzled veteran with 25 years of experience training the military's best shooters. His weathered hands showed the calluses that came from countless hours on the range, and his eyes held the steady focus of someone who understood precision better than most people understood their own names. "Still studying?" he asked, settling into a chair across from her. "You know, books can only teach you so much about shooting. At some point, it comes down to feel and instinct." Sarah looked up from her calculations. "I want to understand every variable that might affect the shot. If I'm going to attempt something this challenging, I need to be as prepared as possible." Williams nodded approvingly. "That's the right attitude. But let me share something I've learned from training hundreds of shooters over the years. The ones who succeed at extreme distances aren't necessarily the ones with the best theoretical knowledge. They're the ones who can trust their instincts and adapt to conditions that no book can fully describe." He pulled out a small notebook filled with his own handwritten observations about long-range shooting. The pages were worn from years of use, and Sarah could see corrections and additions in different inks spanning decades. "Every shot at extreme distance is unique," Williams continued. "The wind patterns, the light, the humidity, even the rotation of the earth affects bullet flight at those ranges. You can calculate all you want, but ultimately you need to read the environment and Make adjustments based on what you observe. Sarah absorbed his words while continuing to study her notes. She appreciated his experience, but also knew that preparation and knowledge were the foundations of confidence. Tomorrow would demand everything she had learned throughout her life about shooting, plus skills she had never needed to develop. The morning of the test arrived with unusual weather conditions. A high-pressure system had moved through during the night, leaving crystal clear air and minimal wind at ground level. For a long-range shot, these conditions were nearly ideal, though Sarah knew that weather at the target location could be completely different from conditions at the shooting position. A small convoy transported her and the evaluation team to the ridge overlooking the valley. The location was spectacular, offering commanding views of the surrounding terrain. Sarah could see the target area in the distance, though at 2,400 meters it appeared as little more than a speck on the landscape. Colonel Harrison had brought along several observers, including some visiting officers from other units. Word of the unusual test had spread, and there was clearly significant interest in whether Sarah could succeed at such an extreme challenge. She noticed a mixture of curiosity and skepticism among the observers, with some making quiet wagers about the outcome. The rifle she would use was a marvel of engineering precision. The weapon system cost more than most people's cars and was capable of accuracy that seemed almost supernatural. Sarah spent considerable time familiarizing herself with its characteristics, adjusting the scope, and checking every mechanical component. Master Sergeant Williams helped her establish the shooting position, setting up bipods, and ensuring she had a stable platform for the shot. Together, they reviewed the ballistic calculations one final time, accounting for the distance, elevation difference, atmospheric conditions, and estimated wind patterns. Temperature is 68 degrees, humidity 35%, barometric pressure is steady, Williams reported, reading from his instruments. Wind at our position is 3 miles per hour from the southwest, but we're seeing different patterns downrange. Sarah studied the valley through high-powered spotting scopes, observing grass movement and dust patterns that would indicate wind conditions along the bullet's flight path. At extreme distance, wind could affect bullet flight in complex ways, with different patterns at various points along the trajectory. I'm seeing variable conditions, she reported. Light wind near our position, but stronger crosswinds in the middle section and what looks like thermal updrafts near the target area. Colonel Harrison checked his watch. You have as much time as you need to prepare, but remember that in real situations, snipers often have limited windows of opportunity. Sarah nodded, understanding the implication. While this was a test rather than a combat situation, the principles remained the same. Hesitation and overthinking could be as detrimental as rushing into a shot without proper preparation. She settled into position behind the rifle, feeling its weight and balance. Through the powerful scope, she could clearly see the target, though it appeared much smaller than anything she had ever attempted to hit. The crosshairs seemed to dance slightly in her field of view, magnifying every minor movement and making the challenge feel even more daunting. For several minutes, Sarah simply observed conditions through the scope. She watched for patterns in wind indicators, studied the light conditions, and allowed her breathing and heart rate to settle into the calm rhythm necessary for precision shooting. Around her, the observers maintained respectful silence, understanding that interruption could disrupt the concentration required for such a shot. Master Sergeant Williams provided periodic updates on atmospheric conditions, but Sarah had entered a zone of focus where external information blended seamlessly with her own observations. She felt connected to the environment in a way that reminded her of hunting with her father, when success depended on understanding subtle signs that most people would never notice. Conditions look stable for the next few minutes, Williams said quietly. Wind pattern seems consistent. Sarah made final adjustments to her scope settings and position. She had accounted for every variable she could identify, calculated trajectories to the best of her ability, and prepared mentally for the challenge ahead. Now came the moment when all preparation would be tested against reality. The silence stretched as she prepared to take the shot that would either validate her place in the elite program or end her aspirations for advanced marksmanship training. In that moment of perfect stillness before action, Sarah felt the weight of everyone's expectations and the significance of what she was attempting to achieve. Colonel Harrison watched through his own spotting scope, his expression unreadable. He had seen many excellent shooters attempt similar challenges, and he knew that success at this distance required not just skill, but also an element of intuition that couldn't be taught or measured. Whether Sarah possessed that rare combination remained to be seen. Time seemed to slow as Sarah entered the final phase of her preparation. Her breathing became deep and controlled, each exhale releasing tension while maintaining the stability necessary for extreme precision. Through the scope, she could see the target with crystal clarity, though at 2,400 meters it remained a formidable challenge that would test every skill she had developed throughout her life. The wind patterns she had been observing began to show a consistent cycle. Every few minutes, conditions would stabilize for approximately 30 seconds before shifting again. Sarah recognized this pattern from her hunting experience, where patience often meant the difference between success and failure. She decided to wait for the optimal moment rather than rushing the shot. Master Sergeant Williams monitored his instruments while maintaining silence, understanding that any disruption could break the concentration necessary for success at this distance. The other observers had also fallen quiet, sensing the gravity of what they were witnessing. Even those who had been skeptical about Sarah's abilities now watched with genuine interest. Colonel Harrison found himself genuinely curious about the outcome. He had arranged this test partly to demonstrate the challenges of advanced marksmanship, but also because something about Sarah's quiet confidence had impressed him. Her performance at shorter distances had been solid, but this shot would reveal whether she possessed the rare combination of skill and intuition necessary for the elite program. Through her scope, Sarah noticed the wind indicators beginning to align with the pattern she had identified. Grass movement downrange showed the approaching window of stable conditions she had been waiting for. Her heart rate remained steady, and her breathing fell into the rhythm that had become second nature during years of shooting practice. Wind stable, Williams reported in a whisper, confirming what Sarah's own observations had indicated. The crosshairs settled on the target with unusual steadiness. Sarah felt that rare moment of perfect alignment where weapon, environment, and shooter seemed to become a single unified system. Her finger found the trigger's contact point, and she applied pressure with the smooth, consistent motion that her father had drilled into her since childhood. The rifle's report echoed across the valley, followed by an eternal second of silence as the bullet traveled its mile-and-a-half journey toward the target. Sarah maintained her position behind the scope, watching for the impact while fighting the urge to lift her head and look for reactions from the observers. At extreme distance, even with powerful optics, confirming a hit required patience. The bullet's flight time allowed for what seemed like endless speculation about success or failure. Sarah kept her scope trained on the target area, knowing that verification would come from what she could observe rather than from the reactions of those around her. Master Sergeant Williams was the first to confirm what his spotting scope revealed. "Target hit," he announced, his voice carrying a note of genuine surprise. "Clean center strike." The silence that followed was broken by Colonel Harrison's exclamation of amazement. "Unbelievable," he said, lowering his own spotting equipment. "In 30 years of military service, I've seen maybe a dozen shooters who could make that shot consistently." Sarah finally lifted her head from the scope, allowing herself a small smile of satisfaction. The shot had felt right from the moment she pulled the trigger, but confirmation still brought a surge of relief and accomplishment. She had not only succeeded, but had done so on her first attempt at such an extreme distance. The observers gathered around to congratulate her, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine respect. Several mentioned that they had never witnessed such shooting precision, particularly from someone so new to military service. Sarah accepted their compliments graciously while maintaining the humble demeanor that had characterized her throughout her military training. Colonel Harrison approached with an expression that mixed admiration with professional assessment. "Mitchell, that was extraordinary shooting. But I need to know this wasn't just luck. Would you be willing to attempt a second shot? Sarah understood the question's implications. One successful shot could be attributed to favorable conditions or chance, but consistency was the mark of genuine skill. She nodded without hesitation, confident in her abilities and eager to prove that her success was based on preparation and technique rather than fortune. The second shot required a longer wait for optimal conditions. Wind patterns had shifted slightly, requiring new calculations and adjustments. Sarah took the time to reassess every variable, understanding that the second shot would be scrutinized even more carefully than the first. When conditions aligned again, she settled into position with the same methodical approach. The rifle felt familiar now, and she had developed a better understanding of its characteristics and behavior. The target appeared unchanged through her scope, but her confidence had grown from the success of the first attempt. The second shot was even more impressive than the first, striking within inches of the original impact point. The precision was remarkable even by the standards of the observers, who had collectively witnessed thousands of hours of advanced marksmanship training. Sarah had not only succeeded twice, but had demonstrated the consistency that marked a truly exceptional shooter. "Outstanding," Colonel Harrison said, genuine admiration clear in his voice. "I've seen enough. Welcome to the Advanced Marksmanship Program, Soldier." The drive back to base was subdued, with most of the group still processing what they had witnessed. Sarah found herself thinking not about the success itself, but about the path that had led to this moment. Every hour of practice with her father, every hunting trip where patience had been more important than rushing, every quiet moment of observation and learning had contributed to her ability to succeed when it mattered most. Master Sergeant Williams sat beside her in the transport vehicle, reviewing the data from the shots. "I've been training shooters for 25 years, he said. "What you did today was special, but more importantly, how you approached it showed real understanding of what precision shooting requires." Sarah appreciated his perspective. The technical success was satisfying, but knowing that experienced professionals recognized her methodology and approach meant even more. She had not just gotten lucky with difficult shots. She had demonstrated mastery of principles that would serve her throughout her military career. Over the following weeks, news of Sarah's achievement spread throughout the military marksmanship community. Instructors from other bases requested details about her background and training methods. Some expressed disbelief that someone so new to military service could perform at such an advanced level, but the documented evidence was undeniable. The Advanced Marksmanship Program proved to be everything Sarah had expected and more. The training was intensive, covering not just shooting techniques, but also fieldcraft, camouflage, observation skills, and the psychological aspects of precision shooting under pressure. She excelled in every area, though she was careful never to appear overconfident or dismissive of the experience her instructors and fellow students brought to the program. Colonel Harrison took a particular interest in her development, often stopping by the range to observe her training sessions. He had recommended her for accelerated advancement through the program, recognizing that her natural abilities combined with exceptional work ethic made her an ideal candidate for the military's most demanding assignments. "You know," he told her during one of these visits, "when I first saw your name on that roster, I never imagined we'd discover someone with your level of ability. The military needs shooters who can perform under the most challenging conditions, and what you demonstrated that day on the ridge showed me you have what it takes." Sarah's success opened doors she had never imagined when she first enlisted. Opportunities for specialized training, advanced assignments, and leadership roles became available as her reputation grew within the marksmanship community. But perhaps more importantly, she had found her place within the military structure and discovered capabilities she had never fully tested. The young woman who had grown up shooting prairie dogs on a Montana ranch had become one of the most promising precision shooters in military service. Her journey from skeptical observers to respected professional had taken only a few months, but the foundation for that success had been building throughout her entire life. Years later, when Colonel Harrison retired from active duty, he would often tell the story of the quiet young woman who had changed his perspective on potential and capability. He would describe how her success had reminded him never to make assumptions based on appearance or background, and how sometimes the most extraordinary abilities came in the most unexpected packages. Sarah's achievement that day on the ridge became legendary within the marksmanship training community. New students would hear the story of the 2,400-meter shot and use it as inspiration for their own development. Instructors would reference her approach and methodology when teaching advanced techniques to promising students. But for Sarah herself, the most important outcome was not the recognition or opportunities that followed. It was the knowledge that she had found her calling and the confidence to pursue excellence without limitation. The shot that had surprised Colonel Harrison and impressed seasoned professionals had been just the beginning of a career dedicated to pushing the boundaries of what was possible through discipline, preparation, and unwavering commitment to precision. The woman who had once been underestimated because of her appearance and background had proven that true capability came from dedication, preparation, and the courage to attempt something that others might consider impossible. Her story became a testament to the power of quiet confidence and the importance of never judging potential by superficial characteristics. In the end, Colonel Harrison's initial chuckle at her shooting skills had been replaced by lasting respect and admiration. The target she had hit at 2,400 meters became a symbol not just of exceptional marksmanship, but of the extraordinary achievements possible when natural talent meets unwavering determination and proper preparation.